Okay, the number one thing I always tell people when they say, how do I improve my writing, is use good active verbs. It's not it, but if you use good active verbs, that's like 80% at least of good writing is using good active verbs and choosing them carefully. So, why? Well, verbs are really like the bedrock of your writing. Nouns and verbs both. Everything else is just sort of flavoring. Think of it as sprinkles or seasoning or whatever you want. But, your meat and potatoes of writing is verbs and nouns. And I would say verbs first. I know usually you hear the phrase nouns and verbs, but I'm going to highlight verbs here because verbs are so important. When you have good verbs, you're 80% of the way to good writing. So one of the things that they do is they energize action images. They eliminate passive voice and they reduce being verbs. Everyone wants to read something that moves, that has action to it, that's interesting, that's moving, that's dynamic. You don't want to read something static and boring. And the way to do that is to literally use action verbs. Passive voice basically communicates no action. It's like a still photograph with the subject of the action frozen with the preposition by or with. I'm going to show you some examples of this. So, for example, passive. The runaway horse was ridden into town by an old white-whiskered rancher. Okay, what's our verb? Our verb is was ridden by. It's not a great verb. Well, who was doing the riding? The rancher was doing the riding, but the rancher's here at the end of the sentence, not at the beginning of the sentence. Usually we would write a sentence like the runaway horse rode into town with an old white-whiskered rancher on its back. That's an active sentence, but that's not what it says. It says the runaway horse was ridden into town by an old white-whiskered rancher. So the doer of the action, the rancher, is at the end, and the receiver of the action, the horse, is at the beginning. And this is a frozen image. It's still. It was ridden into town by this person. It's already happened. The sentence is telling you this has already happened. We're not watching it happen. We're not seeing a movie in our minds. We're not imagining the action happening right before our eyes and we're seeing it unfold. We're just telling you what already happened. You're not experiencing it as it's happening. This is bad. We don't want to write this way when we're trying to communicate action. Now, there is a time and a place for passive voice, but I'm going to say 90% of the time you should use active voice. So how do we change this? Okay, it's actually pretty simple. First, we're going to take the white-whiskered rancher, the person who's doing the action, and put him first. Then we're going to change was ridden into town by. We'll change that into a regular present or past tense verb, in this case, a past tense rode. And then we'll put the rest of the sentence after. So the old white-whiskered rancher rode the runaway horse into town. Okay, we took the rancher who's doing the action, put it first. We have a simple verb, rode, and then the runaway horse into town. That's a good way to fix it. Another passive voice example. The grocery store was robbed by two armed men. Again, this has already happened. It was robbed. We're not seeing it happen. It's a static image. It's not that exciting. So how do we fix it? Well, again, take the doers of the action, two armed men, put them at the beginning, change the verb, get rid of was and get rid of by, and then change the verb, and then put the rest of the sentence at the end. So we have two armed men robbed the grocery store. Cool. Pretty simple when you think of it that way. Again, a being verb, which is also passive voice. The gravel road was on the left side of the barn. Wah, wah. This is kind of boring. The gravel road was on the left side of the barn. Who cares? It's on the left side of the barn. Why are you telling me this? I can't picture that really what's important about this. Okay, well, let's just add a little flavor to it. The gravel road curled around the left side of the barn. Now there's a little more action to it. It's not like it just was there doing nothing. It's curling around the left side of the barn. Obviously, roads don't move, but you get the idea is that by sort of personifying the road a little bit with curled and giving it an action, we're adding life to that image, and that's the important part. Okay, let me just show you an example of a paragraph going from first draft to final draft, because this is not something, and like all these lessons, not necessarily something you could do all the time on your first draft. A lot of this stuff, participles, absolutes, appositives, adjectives out of order, active verbs, a lot of this stuff is going to take rewriting. It'll take less rewriting once you're more practiced at it, but it's still going to take rewriting once you've gotten a first draft down onto paper or on a computer screen these days. So first draft. Okay, Rockwell was a beautiful lake. Notice that I'm putting was in bold here because it's a passive voice verb. It's indicating no action. Rockwell was a beautiful lake. Canada geese could be heard across the water, bugling like tuneless trumpets. Oh, well, we do have one active verb here, bugling. That's good. Near the shore, 2 children were hidden behind a massive maple tree. Watching quietly, they hoped to see the first gosling begin to hatch. Tiny giggles escaped their whispers of excitement. Okay, we've got hoped and escaped. We've got some active verbs in here, so it's fine, but we could do a lot better. If this is what you wrote as a first draft, this is great. This is a fine first draft. Now, when you go back to revise, you can just do a simple Control F or Command F if you're using a Mac and search for was. You might have to search for space was space so that you don't get the word wash, for example, or washing machine. And just search for was and then change all the wases. Do the same. Space, were, space. Search for that. Change the wers to more active verbs. And just by doing that, you're going to see your writing improve astronomically. It's almost going to double in how good your writing is if you just change those things. So here's something that you could do to fix this. So Rockwell Lake echoed with the sounds of Canada geese. Instead of could be heard across the water, okay, they echoed across the water. It echoed with the sounds of Canada geese. Their honking bugled across the water like tuneless trumpets. So here we took a good verb that we had, bugling, and we just changed it to a simple past tense verb, bugled across the water like tuneless trumpets. 2 children, instead of were hidden, we have hid behind a massive maple tree. When you read that, 2 children hid, you can almost see them ducking. You can see their heads disappearing behind the tree as they duck behind the tree to avoid being seen. When you use active verbs, you get active images. You get descriptions that move and that are dynamic, that you can see. And this is when people say, oh, it really painted a picture in my mind. Well, this is why. You can achieve this as a writer by using active verbs. So let's find some passive verbs and change them so that they're active. He was carried out of the building by the firefighter. Boring sentence. How do we change this around? Well, who's doing the action of the verb? The firefighter, right? The firefighter is doing the carrying, so let's put the firefighter first, change was carried to a simple past tense verb, and then throw the rest of the sentence at the end. The firefighter carried him out of the building. Second one, the castle was surrounded by a moat. Okay, you could just make this, again, as simple as possible. What's doing the surrounding? The moat is. So let's put that at the beginning, change the verb to fit, and then throw the rest of the sentence at the end. A moat surrounded the castle. Could it be better than that? Sure, it could be, but this is a good place to start. He felt very happy when he saw his father. You could say, he leapt for joy when he saw his father. He, did a little dance when he saw his father. He ran to his father and jumped into his arms. This is a case of felt very happy is not an active image. We can't see felt very happy. What is he doing to show that he's very happy? Like I said, he did a dance. He jumped for joy. He ran to his father and jumped into his arms. All these things communicate happiness without having to bludgeon the reader over the head with a point and say, he was happy. Yeah, we know he was happy. He jumped for joy and jumped into his father's arms and hugged him. He's obviously happy. That's a show, don't tell thing, which is like the oldest axiom in writing. Just a note, the reason I'm not putting the correct versions of these ones on the screen is because there is really not one correct way to do this. That's one of the things, honestly, that's hard about writing is that there's not one right answer. The answers that I'm giving you to say how I would fix these are just one way to fix them, but they'll give you an idea of how to do it. Another one. I could hear the firecrackers exploding in the distance. You could just say firecrackers exploded in the distance. Firecrackers, the sound of firecrackers reverberated throughout the neighborhood. Awesome. Now we're using exploded, reverberated. We don't need to say I could hear. The sky was full of color. Boring. How about color filled the sky? It's not much different than the sky was full of color, but it's A, shorter. Color filled the sky. 1, 2, 3, 4 words instead of 6. So we're saving 2 words, and the image is getting that much stronger. So I hope you learned something. I hope you can go use more active verbs. I promise you, like I said, it is 80% of good writing is just choosing active verbs when instead you could do something else. Choose active verbs and your writing will proliferate in awesomeness. Thanks.